Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Debate Day from Hofstra University in beautiful Hempstead, New York. Brett Lozerato, Executive Editor of Business Insider, here with Congressman Adam Schiff, ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee and a congressman from California. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
Congressman, I just wanted to first ask you generally, we're coming into this debate with polls that are showing kind of a dead heat. What are your general expectations for how tonight's going to go, and what do you think Secretary Clinton needs to do to come out on top?
My expectation is that Secretary Clinton will do very well. She'll appear very presidential because she is very presidential. She has a great command of the issues, and she'll share tonight what her vision is for the country going forward. In terms of how that will go, a lot depends, I think, on how Donald Trump does. Secretary Clinton, I think, is a very solid debater. Trump is very unpredictable, and part of that will depend on whether he's called out on his many fabrications. He hasn't been in the past, the question going in is the moderator going to call him when he says, for example, I've always been against the Iraq War, when in fact he was for it at the time, or is Secretary Clinton going to have to do both the job of challenging him when he states a plain falsehood, in addition to outlining her vision for the future.
Right. Well, I think you sort of gave your answer here, but what do you think? There's been a lot of ink spilled about the role of the moderator in this debate, and what do you think is the proper role for the moderator and proper amount of fact checking on that? How do you think that balance should be?
I think that it's important for the moderator to follow up with the candidates when the candidate makes an assertion, not to accept it just on face value, and those follow-up questions, I think, are really key. The moderator is also, I think it's important to give the right amount of latitude for the candidates to engage each other. But I think that the prior forum with Matt Lauer was rightly criticized for accepting at face value many things that Donald Trump said that just simply weren't true, and are really sort of beyond debate, false or implausible. So it'll be interesting to see when Donald Trump says he has a secret plan, whether the moderator will leave it at that in terms of dealing with ISIS, or whether the moderator will press him, or whether Secretary Clinton will have to do both.
What's your general advice for Secretary Clinton? There's been a lot written about the two Donald Trumps that could show up in this debate, but which Hillary Clinton do you think should show up? One that goes more on the attack and on the offensive against him, or one that sort of plays it cool, the calm, steady hand that we sort of come to expect from her in a lot of situations?
I think there really is only one Hillary Clinton. I think she's going to be steady, she's going to be solid, she's going to be extremely knowledgeable. If the debate were judged on the merits, she will win hands down. If the debate is judged on style, Trump is a performer. TV is his medium. He's a reality TV star. If people aren't going to, penetrate to look at, okay, is what he's saying true? Is what he's saying plausible? Is it consistent with what we know about him? Do the zingers, how much do the zingers really matter in what you want in a president? Then all bets are off. But I think the American people are going to ultimately choose a president not that they want to see on reality TV, but that they expect to do the job as commander-in-chief. And that, I think, is a pretty simple choice.
So let's talk a little bit about some topics that are bound to come up tonight, one of which is Russia. And you last week, along with Senator Feinstein, I believe, released a letter accusing Russia of meddling in the U.S. election, which is sort of an extraordinary charge for going back decades. But can you just sort of lay out the claims that you made and what's going on there, and talk a little bit about the implications if indeed Russia is meddling, as you say?
It's been clear for some time, even on the basis of publicly available information, the very credible cybersecurity firms, for example, that analyzed the DNC hack, that Russia was hacking into our political institutions. But Senator Feinstein, I thought it very important to say, not just on the basis of what the private firms have said, but on the basis of what we've been briefed as intelligence ranking members in House and Senate. It's our conviction that Russia is trying to meddle in our political affairs. And we think that the American people ought to know that. They ought to know if a foreign adversary is trying to influence the election process. So we felt it very important to call them out. We also have the conviction that this kind of very blatant interference would not be taking place unless it was sanctioned at the higher levels of the Russian government. So it's very serious business. We have been urging the administration similarly to call out Russia. I hope they will. I don't think they've made a decision yet about whether to so-called name and shame Russia. But I think we have to establish a deterrent which begins with naming and shaming. Otherwise, we're going to see a lot more of these hacks and a lot more dumping of information.
Yeah. What more do you think the Obama administration could do? Is it just naming and shaming, or is there more? Are there more steps that they could take on the diplomatic level to respond?
There are a range of options that they have. They all begin with naming and shaming, but the administration can decide that if Russia continues or escalates its conduct, that it will go beyond that, and it will sanction individuals or institutions in Russia for being part of this. It can lead a international coalition, because we're not the only country that Russia is trying to interfere with. They've been doing this in Europe for quite some time. So there are a number of steps that they could take. They could also take steps that they don't have to announce to the public. But I think it's very important that we push back, because in my experience, the only thing that Putin respects is a strong response. Getting no response at all, he views as an open door.
Yeah.
And so Senator Feinstein and I feel it very important to push back.
On another Russia note, there was a big report last week that sort of detailed what the Trump campaign now says is a former advisor who allegedly had back-channel conversation with Moscow about sanctions. What's your general reaction to that? And I guess more broadly, we've seen a lot written about the Mr. Trump's business interests in Russia, and I was just wondering if what that says to you about, and what are the implications of that if he becomes president?
I have profound concerns, given what an adversary that Russia has become, that so many people surrounding Trump seem to have very close ties to the Kremlin. People like Paul Manafort, who they had to get rid of in terms of the campaign, had very questionable ties and business interests in Ukraine. Carter Page, who similarly the Trump campaign is trying to disavow. Mike Flynn, who has appeared on Russian TV and I think has not been willing to disclose whether he was compensated by what is the propaganda arm for the Kremlin. But more significant than anything else probably is the financial ties that Trump has in Russia. Newsweek documented a lot of the business interests of the Trump empire. And without the disclosure of his tax returns, it's hard to evaluate just how deep those interests are, which is why it's so unprecedented for someone running for president not to disclose their taxes. And I think clearly the Trump campaign is worried, as Trump's son said, that it would become a big campaign issue for them, and it is, and it should be. And this, of course, may explain why Trump has such an affinity for Putin, why he's so disparaging of NATO, why he talks about recognizing the illegal annexation of Crimea or easing sanctions on Russia. All those positions are very much against our national security interest and beg the question about whether there's an economic private interest that's really driving Trump's interest and positions on these issues.
Yeah, and lastly, I think about, I wanted to ask you about something that also loosely ties in, or not really that loosely, but the situation in Syria, where we've seen over the past 5 days, I think the city of Aleppo has been under heavy fire from the regime, and we saw Samantha Power, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, yesterday accusing Russia of barbarity, I think was the word that she used. First of all, I guess, what more, if anything, do you want to see from the administration on that issue, and also what more do you think the candidates need to address about that, and what do you think they need to say about that tonight?
Well, I think it's an absolute horror what's gone on in Syria, and the most recent, of course, is the Russian deliberate bombing of an aid convoy in conjunction with the Syrian military. They are now laying siege to Aleppo at the cost of hundreds of lives, it seems, almost every day. It's an appalling crime against humanity, I think. I think we're seeing war crimes being committed. So, it leaves me with no confidence that the Russians are going to be any kind of a partner in terms of a military effort, as they have said they're interested in. It seems they still think they can win this war by dint of military force, and they don't care how many civilian casualties there are. So, I think we have to go into this with our eyes wide open. I certainly admire everything the Secretary has been trying to do in terms of bringing about a ceasefire and aid convoys, but the Russians don't appear to have any real interest in this, and I think we have to be cognizant of that, and I support Secretary Clinton's strategy about trying to create a safe space in Syria, a no-fly zone, a safe zone where people can live unmolested by Russian and Syrian aircraft, and I think we need to strategize about how to bring that about.
Yep. All right. I think that's all we had for Congressman Schiff. Thank you so much for joining us. Brett Logerato, Executive Editor of Business Insider, with Congressman Adam Schiff. We will see how it all plays out tonight. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.